to live and to love the gospel of the Lord.
Heart to Heart, a Catholic media ministry, presents an inspiring gospel reflection by Father Michael Sparrow. Father Michael is a Jesuit priest working as a writer and retreat master at the Bellarmine Jesuit Retreat House outside Chicago.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When Jesus saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. By now it was already late, and his disciples approached him and said, "This is a deserted place, and it is already late. Dismiss the crowd so they can go to the surrounding farms and villages and buy something for themselves to eat." Jesus said to them in reply, "Give them some food yourselves." But they said to him, "Are we to buy 200 days' wages worth of food and give it to them to eat?" He asked them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said, 5 loaves and 2 fish. So he gave orders to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass. The people took their places in rows by hundreds and by 50s. Then taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing, broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up 12 wicker baskets full of fragments and what was left of the fish. Those who ate of the loaves were 5,000 men. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today's Gospel account is one of those few stories that are recounted in all 4 of the Gospels. But because it's recounted in all 4 of the Gospels, in the course of the year or years, we hear this story many, many times. And because it's so familiar to us, we can kind of gloss over or just fall back on familiar insights that we've received in the past. Today's account is from Mark's Gospel, chapter 6. And I found it helpful to go back and just look at what was happening in chapter 6 of Mark's Gospel. It begins with Jesus going to his hometown of Nazareth and there being rejected by the people. Fresh from that rejection and shaking the dust from his feet, Jesus sends the disciples out on their first missionary journey. And while they're gone, Jesus gets news that his cousin, John the Baptist, has been beheaded. Dealing with that grief, his disciples come back to him. And they're all excited at the newness of their mission, and they're eager to tell Jesus of what they've experienced. And so he says, let's come away to a deserted place to rest. And in the midst of that, the people get wind of where Jesus is headed, and they all are there when they disembark from the boats. Plan B. Mark recounts that Jesus, seeing the vast crowd, his heart is moved with pity, and he teaches them at great length. Let's just pause for a moment and recognize that if anyone deserved a vacation or some time off, it's Jesus and his disciples. They had just been giving retreats. They had been preaching parish missions. They had been going from town to town. And Jesus' own heart is probably still filled with grief at the death of his cousin. Perhaps he's still smarting from the rejection of his own hometown of Nazareth. All of that says, I need a vacation. I need a break. And yet he doesn't get one. Because the people are coming to him with their need. This story shows us a certain flexibility of the need to respond. Of course we need to plan, and of course we need to have our strategic plans, and we need to have our agendas set up, and we need to figure out what we're going to do in the course of a day. But the bottom line is we need to respond to what is. When some urgent need presents itself, we have to be flexible enough to be able to set those needs aside and respond to what's before us. 5,000 men plus women and children. Who knows the exact size of the crowd? Now, how do we feed people with meager resources? There are 5 steps here that are in the course of the story. Number 1 is you turn to Jesus with the need. What are we going to do, Lord? There's all these people, and we don't have enough money, and we don't have enough food. Step 1, always bring the problem to the Lord. Number 2, bring what little we have. Jesus says, what do you got? They don't know what they got. They got to go check. Okay, we got 5 loaves and we got a couple of fish. You bring whatever you got and you bring it to Jesus. Find out what are the resources we have, bring it to Jesus. And then what does Jesus do? He takes the little they have and he lifts it up to the Father in heaven in prayer and praise and supplication and trust. Now here I think is the trickiest part of the whole enterprise. Jesus hands the few loaves and the few fishes to them and says, distribute them. Can you just imagine the disciples scratching their heads, looking at the meager resources and says, this is the craziest. I mean, Jesus, you've told us a lot of crazy things, but this is the craziest. But they trusted him. They took the few loaves and the 5 loaves and the few fish, and they began to do the impossible. All right, Jesus said to do this. This will be good for a few laughs. This will be gone in a couple of seconds. And then, lo and behold, the basket is filled. And they give it, and it's filled. And it's given, and it's filled. Until 5,000 men plus women and children are filled to the point of satisfaction. There's a lesson for all of us, isn't there? Today's gospel ends there with naming how many men had eaten. But then Mark goes on in his gospel. Jesus dismisses the crowd, dismisses the disciples, and then he himself goes off to pray. Perhaps he's doing an Ignatian examen, reflecting on all that has been all that has unfolded that day and all that has unfolded in the last weeks. Jesus takes the time to say thank you, to give what he has back to the Father. Today we celebrate the feast of Elizabeth Ann Seton, a woman of society, a woman raised in privilege and wealth, a mother who lost some of her children, who lost her wealth, whose husband died of sickness, who wasn't afraid to change her faith and to follow Jesus more closely through the Catholic faith. When she looked out at the little that she had after she had lost her fortune, she leaned more deeply into Jesus, trusting him, asking him, and saw the needs of so many others. Even though she had lost her husband and lost some of her children, lost her fortune, she saw the even greater needs of those around her, and bringing what little she had, the resources that she had, and asking for the Lord, she did the impossible. She started a new congregation of sisters. She started the Catholic school system for girls in this country, started hospitals. Her giving was magnified, because she took what she had and gave it to the Lord. One closing example that inspires me continuously to this day is a friend of mine in Cincinnati by the name of Roger Grine. Roger's an accountant. He made millions in the stock market. And then he had a love a passionate love for youth, and he wanted to teach them philanthropy. So he started an organization called Magnified Giving. He would take grants and give it to the schools, and then ask the schools to figure out how they would give that money away to others, inspiring others. Their mission is to educate, inspire, and engage students in philanthropy. And Roger did that through his largesse, through his millions that he had. But Roger wasn't diversified in his income, and when the stock market crashed a number of years ago, Roger lost virtually his entire fortune. And he had made commitments to all of these schools, so what is he going to do? He takes head in hand and he goes around to his wealthy business friends and to the schools, and he said, I don't have the money, but I think this is a worthwhile program. Will you help me educate youth in the importance of philanthropy? And lo and behold, many other people started to give, and the program expanded exponentially. So that in the year 2021, 2,626 students were engaged in programs of learning philanthropy. 92 programs were funded, and 99 community nonprofits were engaged in philanthropy, far exceeding what Roger could ever have given by himself. He took the little he had, brought it before the Lord, asked the Lord and others to contribute to that mission. There's more than one way to feed the 5,000. Amen?